Okay,
Yes.
so thank you so much, Sharon, for taking us through that critical section on mainstreaming of gender into the post-2020. And we hope that this discussion will continue because it is really significant. And as Sharon mentioned, when we're talking about gender, we're not just talking about girls and women, but we're talking about also, the boys and the men. And so this inclusive approach is necessary if we have to realize the ambition that the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is expected to have. Our next speaker is from South Africa. We are lucky enough to have her, and she is going to be our last speaker, but definitely not the least. This morning, I had the displeasure of ambushing her to speak to us because she is well versed with this aspect of 30 by 30, especially when it relates to the ocean. For those who joined when we were starting until now, you've realized that so far we have not talked about a critical aspect of our livelihoods and lives, which is the oceans. And it is only vital that we bring in the perspective of someone who has worked on the oceans for a long time, and someone who holds very, very crucial insights that can help us propel the 30 by 30 narrative forward and ensure that we're including the element of Africa's oceans into the discussion. So our next speaker is Shannon Lee Sanilall. I hope I didn't butcher that name very much. And she studied marine sciences at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Her research focused on the effects of climate change and plastic pollution on our oceans. She decided that she needed to do more than just research and start making an actual difference in the conservation space. For that reason, she joined the South African-based group, the Youth for Marine Protected Areas, also known as the Youth for MPS, as an education coordinator and steering committee member. She is currently the African Youth Coordinator at Wide Trust. She is actively involved in advocating for the expansion of marine protected areas in South Africa, and a youth-led in Maziwe 30 by 30, a youth lead in the Maziwe 30 by 30 campaign. She is excited to be heading to COP15 this December to be a voice of the youth. Shannon, first of all, apologies for the ambush that I bestowed upon you this morning. And thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for accepting to speak to us on such a short notice. Please carry on and just take us through what is the 30 by 30 when we're talking in the ocean context. Where do we stand as an African, as a region, as a continent, and more specifically as youth? Thank you.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Kevin. And it's more than a pleasure to speak. So I do have a presentation. If I'm able to share my screen, is that possible?
Oh yeah, I am a fossil myself here on Zoom, but I'll try to assign you the co-host role.
Thank you. So I was ambushed, as you heard, this morning to please come and present. And I was a bit in a panic because I didn't have a presentation ready. But thankfully, my lovely, lovely colleague, Samantha Hoffmeyer, had a presentation ready, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to speak. So I will be presenting her presentation today.
Perfect. Thanks to Sam. Are you able to share your screen now?
Yes, I am.
Great. Well, the floor of Zoom is all yours.
Okay, cool. I'm going to get going now. Okay, cool. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Shannon. I'm presenting on behalf of Youth for MPAs, which is a youth movement of young people that are passionate about safeguarding our oceans for the future. And today I'm going to talk to you about why should we firstly do this? Why should we safeguard our oceans for the future? and how can we play a role in conservation? So as I've said before, this presentation is courtesy of Samantha Hoffmeyer. There we go. So ecosystems are protecting water quality by removing pollutants and removing nutrients that cause algal blooms. And they help maintain species and genetic biodiversity to help our ecosystems adapt to climate change and other changes. Our marine biodiversity also offers us a whole host of ecosystem services that without we would not be able to exist on this planet. And it also homes a ton of our marine creatures. It also gives us a cultural heritage, and the sea is a place of cleansing and spiritual renewal for many people. So keeping coastal areas healthy provides resilience in ecosystems. It armors our shorelines. Healthy shorelines protect and buffer coastal communities and infrastructure from extreme weather and sea levels. And just to give you guys a small insight on why this is so important, is in 2017, along the western coast of Africa, 13,000 people lost their lives due to flooding and coastal erosion. That is a lot of people. So moving on, the next one is fishery sustainability. We have fishing and spawning nurseries that we need to protect. And if we protect these with the adequate amount of protection, we will be able to ensure food security for the future generations to come. It also gives us tourism, which obviously increases our economics, and it gives people that live along the coastline jobs. And if you live in a landlocked area such as Rwanda, and you're wondering right now, well, what is she going on about? How does an MPA have anything to do with me, and how is it going to benefit me? So we need to remember that our oceans are living laboratories, and they provide rich opportunities for researchers to learn more about marine life. For example, there's been a number of sponges that have been found that have cancer-fighting compounds. Rainforests are responsible for only 1/3 of the world's oxygen, and the ocean is responsible for 70% of the oxygen that we breathe. So to sum it all up, why should we safeguard our oceans? So if we keep the marine ecosystems working properly and protect the range of species living there, ultimately we'll be helping people to benefit from the ocean and ensuring life goes on. One of my favorite sayings is that biodiversity is all life on Earth and essential for all life on Earth. So the world has come up with several meetings, groups, and frameworks over the years to work towards this. And in 2015, the United Nations created 17 sustainable biodiversity goals. And every year there's a progress report, which is based on the Global Indicator Framework or data from the national and regional systems. So we're just going to go through a few of them. So particularly, we're looking at goal 14, and that focuses on healthy oceans and seas, and they're essential to our existence and cover 7% of the planet. And we have managed to do tremendous damage to these and our precious resources. So over the years, fish stocks have been depleted, and now 1/3 of the world's assessed fisheries are being pushed beyond their biological limits. I don't need to even get started on marine pollution. I'm sure that all of us can see what's happening to the ocean with plastic, polystyrene. It's just getting worse. And then we have the global warming and climate change that are affecting our ecosystems, our sea levels, and our weather patterns, and that's wreaking havoc when it comes to our climate and for biodiversity. And then we have eutrophication, and this is when nutrients run off from agriculture into the ocean and causes algal blooms. And this causes hypoxia, and dead zones start occurring, and we lose massive tons of biodiversity in these dead zones. So over 3 billion people around the world rely on our oceans, And we have a responsibility to look after our planet, maintaining livelihoods and ecosystem services for our people. But how can we do this? How do we maintain our ecosystem services? How do we protect our ocean? And the answer is through MPAs, which are marine protected areas. And the report showed that over half of the key biodiversity areas in the world are not protected. How do we ensure that we continue to enjoy the benefits and resources and avoid or minimize these serious and ongoing threats? And the answer is just through MPAs. It's as simple as that. And the United Nations, through the SDG targets, set for 10% of the ocean to be protected by 2020. And it's 2022, and we still have not hit that target. We only have 8% of our ocean that is currently protected, and only 2.4% is no-take zones. So this is just a representation of our ocean. That line on the top, that orange line, is 8% of the ocean that's protected. And this is 2.4%, that is a no-take zone. So another way to look at it, and I'm sure we all love pizza here, is if our ocean was a pizza. So this is the entire ocean represented by one pizza. And then this is all that we have saved for the future generations. This is all that we have to feed our generations to come. This is 8% of the ocean. And this is 2.4% of the ocean that is a no-take zone. So I don't know about you, but that's not enough pizza for me. I'm definitely going to go hungry if I have to eat this tonight. And do you think that the space that we're currently protecting covers all of the habitats in our ocean? We have many, many habitats. I don't think it even touches the surface. So now I'm going to tell you a little story about South Africa. So South Africa has a rich biodiversity along the coastal regions and in our oceanic ecosystems. And the warm Indian Ocean meets the cold Atlantic Ocean, and the Southern Ocean crosses along the coast. And in the past, marine spaces in South Africa were protected through 25 MPAs, and that only covered 0.4% of the total ocean space. And only 0.16% of that was a no-take zone. So this led to ideas running in people's heads, and they had decided, okay, well, if we secure our ocean, then we're pretty sure we can secure our economy. So what they decided to do was come up with an operation called Operation Bikisa, and this would fast-track economic growth through marine protected areas. The conservationist scientists and government met and said, okay, one of the best ways we can do this is to expand MPAs in South Africa. And in 2019, we had reached a total of 5% marine protected areas, and we had an additional 20 MPAs that were announced. So that took us up to 43% of 43 marine protected areas. So where do youth come in? This is where we come in right now. So we've been a pivotal point in this process and engaging with government to ensure that their voices are heard in advocating for increased ocean protection of our oceans. And the Youth for MPAs is a youth-led organization that was formed in 2018 with an aim to advocate for the proclamation and expansion of MPAs. And this is proudly supported by Wild Trust. In 2018, we worked closely with the Only This Much campaign, or Ocean Impact campaign, along with government and NGOs to achieve that 5% protection. We also wrote many letters to our government stating that we're not happy that oil and gas companies are allowed to come in and to wreak havoc on our shores. And we also wrote a letter saying that we need to protect our oceans a little bit more. So here's a demonstration that we put together, and it was a protest against oil and gas. What is important to note here is that a march may not always be the right answer to raising the voice of youth, and in this case, it worked for us. But it's important to understand what message will reach your target audience and the positive and assertive way to do it. So in addition to this, I know that a lot of people are like, what about Indigenous communities? You guys have just went and had a whole lot of new MPAs put into place, but did you guys actually address Indigenous communities? And the answer is yes. So Wild Trust, together with Youth for MPAs, went to indigenous communities and a whole lot of coastal communities and had engagements with them regarding MPAs. So we had firstly listened to what they had to say and listen to their genuine concerns and see how we can put that into an MPA that was made with people in mind. And through that, we've had active participation with communities and that are now seeing the rewards of our MPAs. So just to touch a bit more on what Youth for MPAs has done is we hosted the first African Youth Summit ever, and we had over 500 attendees from 18 African countries. So before I go on, just a few things that you need to be mindful of is that when you are advocating for a cause, you need to be educated on it, and your task team and your network need to be educated on that task beforehand. You need to be clear as to who your audience is. In our case, it's the South African government. You need to be respectful in the way that you address them, and there are many ways to highlight an issue and bring it to the table. One of the most amazing ways that we found was through art and storytelling. It's been very, very effective. But where do we go now? So 2020 has come and gone, and we have not hit our global target of 10% by 2020. And don't get me wrong, we have progressed. But it's not because countries don't want to contribute. Sometimes it's because other countries have not come up with the right funding to allow developing countries to fast track MPAs or protected areas in their country. So what now? So what they've done is they've made a new goal, 30 by 30. And this says that 30% of our planet needs to be protected by the year 2030 in order to ensure that we do not lose any more biodiversity that's currently being lost. So 30% conservation goal was chosen by scientists because it's a level that gives the planet a chance to recover and could protect millions of species from extinction. So coalition of 60 countries are now proposing 30 by 30 target, which will be introduced in the CBD COP15 this year. So this is a map that was created by some scientists in South Africa in support of the 30 by 30. And what's really important is to take into consideration indigenous communities, fishing communities, and people. And what this map has done is they have basically, the authors of this map have basically gone to the communities and spoken to them and asked them, what species do you need to be protected? What catch limits do we need to put onto these species? How can we basically help you and ensure that your food security and your livelihood is not affected? So this map is created taking into account habitats, species fisheries, oil and gas, and all other stakeholders, including indigenous communities. So I won't pretend to know much about the history of MPAs in Africa, but from a brief overview of my understanding of MPAs in South Africa, I'm sure it applies further into Africa as well. And people mistrusted the ideas of MPAs as they seem to be restricted to humans, and this is because they haven't always taken people into account. But this is changing now, and in South Africa, lessons have been learned, and engagement and inclusion is being considered and a fundamental step in decision-making now. So let's look at Africa. The blue on this map indicates MPAs. Gibbon has a great example in this movement. Since announcing its new MPA network in 2014, the country has created 20 marine protected areas, increasing protection from less than 1% to 26%. Madagascar is using locally managed marine areas to empower its communities, and the Seychelles has restructured its debt for marine conservation, and the first world is doing this too. Looking at the protection of Africa, MPAs cover a total of between 12 and 17% of marine and coastal areas. So African future generations have the hope of only 17% of our oceans. So only 17% of our ocean right now would be able to feed us. So call to action. And I know that 30 by 30 is a difficult pill to swallow. I know that marine protected areas have been enforced incorrectly in the past, but there is hope. And we have seen change, and there is systematic change that is currently happening. And if we do not protect 30% of our ocean by 2030, we are going to be facing major biodiversity loss. And if this happens, it means many people are going to go hungry. And we know that hunger is an issue currently that we're all facing. But can you imagine it getting worse? So I also want to just give you a brief idea of more protection or better protection. A lot of people think we need better protection. But let's say I was given 1 million rand and I was told that I can buy apples for the whole of Africa to ensure that everyone is fed. And I think, you know what? I don't think I want to use that 1 million rand to buy apples for the whole of Africa. I know that South Africa is in dire need of food. So I'm going to use the 1 million rand and buy apples only for South Africa. And I know that South Africa is going to be fed for many generations to come. And so I do that. Do you think that's a better idea than making sure that the whole of Africa is fed? I surely think the whole of Africa should rather be fed than a small area. So if you think of the apples and the money as effort, I think it needs to be spread everywhere rather than concentrated in one area. So we do need better protection. We do need to get rid of paper parks, but at the same time, we cannot concentrate all our efforts into one marine protected area and making sure that that marine protected area is the only one that is governed correctly. We rather have many marine protected areas and then work on governance from there. But thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope I've answered some questions. And at this point, yeah, I'll also just take some questions from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shannon, for that delicious presentation that left us hungry for knowledge, but also hungry for some pizza as well. Just looking at your second last presentation, no, your second last slide, sorry. The countries that are in blue, who are those?
Oh, sorry, I should have
The
mentioned.
countries in white, who are those?
The countries in blue are those that support 30 by 30. And I know South Africa is highlighted in blue on this as well. We have supported it, but we have not signed up to the hack. So it's a very confusing statement, but for now we're saying that they support 30 by 30. But all of the countries in white are countries that currently do not support or have not signed up to the hack.
Great. So I see that there is a question from Knowledge. And before I give Knowledge the floor, I just have one question for you, Shannon. So Shannon, you and I and probably a number of people in the Zoom chat today have studied the impact of plastics on the oceans, and we are both headed to the COP. But then I was looking at the target 7, which is talking about pollution in the context of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And I couldn't see explicitly where plastic pollution is underlined. It's talking about pollution from all sources. But do you think such generalization of terms will yield into the ambition that we need to tackle specific challenges like plastic pollution?
So I want to actually correct you because if you look at target 7, the very last 2 words are plastic based. Have you seen that?
Oh, my apologies. I was actually looking at the older, not revised version of the draft of the post-2020. And so do you think that, okay, then I can rephrase my question to, do you think this will be sustained through the discussions of the COP15, that plastic pollution will remain explicitly targeted as, a source of, marine pollution in general? Or do you think, because before the COP15, there's gonna be a discussion on the during the open-ended working group 5 meeting, right? So,
Yeah.
and with that discussion comes the possibility of some elements of the draft being removed, or some being altered, or some being added, or stuff like that. So do you think we should sustain that text as it is?
So I think plastic pollution is something that definitely needs to be included. I don't think there's an option when it comes to that. Most of our oceans being damaged through plastic pollution. And the scary thing is so my research was basically in plastic pollution. But if you take a fish out of the ocean right now and you dissect it and you dissolve it in acid, and then you look at the microplastics that are in that fish, you will find that this microplastics, not only in the gut of the fish, but also in the flesh, so the part that we eat, which means that we will now be consuming microplastics. And I know a recent study has shown that there's microplastics in human blood. And I mean, it's not surprising when we look at the amount of plastic that is in our ocean. And if you look at many, many countries in Africa, they depend on fish as their main food, basically, right? So I think we really need to include plastic pollution. And I am attending the open-ended working group 5. And if I do get a chance to speak on it, that is definitely something that I will say that needs to be included. But with that, I would also like to just say that we are currently decreasing the amount of plastic that enters the ocean. And this is through some countries banning single-use plastics. So as much as we have a lot of plastic in our ocean, but it's safe to say that we have reduced the amount that has been entering the ocean over the last 2 years.
Thank you so much. Knowledge, do you want to unmute and just ask your question directly, because we are almost coming to an end. Knowledge, your hand is up.
Yeah.
All right, Knowledge. Oh, there you go. Please carry on.
Yeah. So my question is to do with quality. She gave an example to say you've got an opportunity to buy 1 million apples to distribute across Africa, and you specifically know that there may be no need for you to give apples to South Africa, considering its economic and Egypt, for example. But you may even focus on Ethiopia because that's where the need is. I'll try to let it back to conservation to say, we have seen that, for example, in Zimbabwe, we're even failing to protect the 27% that we have in terms of capacity to protect, to man the areas, to even improve on the populations. Does she think in increasing to say maybe at 40% will actually improve the quality of conservation, or actually lose more because we now have to spread our resources on a small space, on the, in terms of a bigger space, but resources are limited kind of approach? Thank you.
Thank you. So I will request.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Shannon.
Continue.
I request that we take the other question, then you answer them both at a go, because Franklin also has a question. So yeah, Franklin.
Yeah, thank you. The presentations is good. I really appreciate the presentation and with the real life experience that is formed within it. But this is not really a direct question, it's a conscience to, or it's something we all need to think about. Like she said, protecting one area is key, but you also need to consider that there are other areas that also will be in danger, though there will be a need somewhere more than the other. So I'm thinking, like, what can we do now we are forming ourselves in these kinds of network? What are things that can be done, seeking that we collaboratively work in solving these problems? Do you have other plan, or what are something now you are going for the COP15? what are those things that you carry most, especially for young people effort towards or getting a clean ocean, and not just the ocean, but other, marine area that will also be affected by these kinds of plastic? Because those who are closer to the ocean will squarely look at the ocean, but there are other river, lakes, and stream, creek that have been polluted with these kinds of plastic as well. So what are those efforts that we can all put together as young people, or what can we push now to see into it that we all work together in moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Knowledge, I absolutely love your question. And it is a real issue, is resources. How do we maintain our resources, but also just spread them out to ensure that our oceans are protected? And I think what's really, really important to remember is that a lot of the stuff that we're facing are systematic issues, and it's something that our government needs to address. So we've had a similar situation here in South Africa where we've had an expansion of MPAs, but then we don't have the manpower to actually govern them. So what we've done is, like, through some of the companies here in my province, we've created more jobs so that people can go out and man the areas correctly. And they don't need to be university educated. They don't even need to finish high school in that case. They just need to be from the area, and you give them a position of power to look after their area. And we've seen that that's worked perfectly. For instance, down in the Cape side, so that's on the west coast of South Africa, they have employed people in the province, basically, as fishing guides. And when people come into their area and want to catch fish, they have to hire one of the fishing guides to go with them to tell them, okay, you can keep this fish, you're not allowed to keep that fish, that species is not allowed, this is undersized. And in Ismangaliso, which is in my province, but further up, we've taken everyday and ordinary people that did not have jobs and could not actually look after their families, and we've trained them in turtle monitoring. And so we've taken everyday ordinary people and we've given them the ability to protect their own area. So I think a lot of it has to do with systematic change that needs to take place.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Do you have any insights on Franklin's question about what we can do as youth collectively to address, plastic pollution and other issues?
Yes. So I think what's really important is that Gibbon is given us such an amazing space right now to come and interact with each other. And I think if we reach out to our chapters, I'm sure that we can find a way to collectively put our voices together, and hopefully Gibbon can help us represent that. If I am allowed to, I will pop my email address in the chat, and those of you that would like us Youth for MPAs to try and be your voice whilst we're at COP, we'd be more than happy to do so. So I know that I am on Gibbon's platform and I don't want to hijack it, but I think firstly, reach out to your Gibbon chapter and ask them to be your voice. And Kevin, if I have permission, can I pop my email into the chat?
Yeah, sure. Also, if you allow us, we're going to share the slides that you presented today.
Yes,
if you can share with the slides with us later.
I most definitely will. My email's in the chat, and if you want to say anything, just pop me an email.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shannon. We can't appreciate you enough. As I said before, thank you so much for turning up and such a short notice. And we hope that this conversation will continue even beyond today. And hope to see you at the Biodiversity COP next month. And we hope that we can have a side event at the COP where we can talk through these issues, invite other stakeholders, because one of the things that have been raised through this dialogue today is the need to constantly engage other role players. As you mentioned, most of the issues that we're trying to tackle at the grassroots level are systemic, and so we need to bring all actors together to ensure that we are on the same page and we are working and pulling towards the same direction. Thank you so much.